Cassius by Madeline Gressel. A few weeks after my sister died, Kaz climbed into bed with me. I was wearing only a big white towel wrapped around my body, and Kaz took off all his clothes too, maybe out of some weird form of respect. We lay there, naked, with the towel between us, pressed together while he held me, his face in the back of my wet hair. I kept worrying that one of my parents would walk in and then deciding I didn't care, in a little loop. Worry, I don't care. I thought you were so pretty the first time I saw you, Kaz said into my hair, and I lay there silently, praying. The first time I saw Kaz was at my father's office about 4 years ago. We still live on my grandfather's farm in the west of the state, but my father works as an accountant. He does pretty much everyone's taxes in the county. My mom always wanted to move somewhere more cosmopolitan, but my dad would never give up the farm. I guess they got divorced over it, but my mom didn't move. She stuck around the county and kept doing what she does, which is not much of anything. Kaz had just started working for my father. My dad told me that his mother couldn't afford to send him to college because she was a tweaked-up Tina whore who wouldn't pay if she could. He didn't use those exact words, but I got it. He said something more respectful like, "It's a sad situation." Our principal pointed Kaz in Dad's direction because he was good at numbers, actually good at everything, and my dad took him on. Kaz has been working for him ever since. Kaz and we went to the same high school, but I'd only just started when we met. He was in my sister's year, and I don't remember seeing him around. He's quiet in a way that often gets mistaken for arrogance. He also happens to be pretty good looking. Eventually, he felt sort of like a brother, watching out for me a lot in high school, making sure I didn't get too drunk and helping me with my homework. The first time I met him, I was only 14, and I asked, "What kind of name is Kaz?" "It's short for Cassius," he said. "Where's it from?" I asked. He smiled. "My mom liked boxing, I guess," he said. "Or the classics." I definitely wasn't pretty back then when he first saw me. So either Kaz was trying to make me feel good, or he remembers things retarded. Eventually, lying on that bed nearly 4 years later, I turned around to face Kaz, trying to keep the towel over my breasts, and we started kissing. I wasn't a virgin exactly, but I had never been so close to a man. Never so intimate. And I definitely never felt the way I felt in that moment, like lightning bolts were shooting from the backs of my thighs down to my Achilles tendons. I could barely breathe. But that feeling passed, replaced by another, more familiar one. And soon I was crying all over his chest like a baby, tears and snot everywhere. He kept untangling my wet hair from my mouth and kissing it, but when I couldn't stop to breathe, he scooped me up, full in his arms, and he just held me there, rocking me back and forth. We began to spend a lot of time together after that, in a different way than before. Even though I was afraid to. I couldn't be in the house. It seemed like every room I walked into held my parents holding each other. They say that 40% of parents who experience the loss of a child get divorced, but for my parents it was the opposite. After 6 years of near silence, they began to sleep together again. It made me sick. Whenever I walked in a room, they would give each other this look and then give it to me. I couldn't stand to be near them. Most of my friends were uncomfortable then, so that left Kaz. He took me on long walks or drove me to the lake, and sometimes we would bring a blanket and go at each other like crazy in the buzz and warble of the afternoon heat. But I always ended up crying when I loosened my grip on that hardened little marble inside of me that just barely kept me together. Part of it was sadness, and part of it was fear. Whatever I had now, I knew how fast I could lose it. That's something you never forget once you know. Third part of it was something else. Never in my life had I felt a feeling so intense. It felt like I was ripping apart at the seams. I guess it's what they call desire. I learned a lot about Kaz on those walks. Things I never thought to ask, about his family and about the things he wanted for himself. I'd known he was funny before, but I never really thought about it, not hard enough. It was weird to realize that this guy who'd been hanging around our house for so long is just like me, and so beautiful. After the funeral, I told my parents I wouldn't be starting college in the fall. They knew enough not to push me, but Kaz didn't. He told me that it's what I had to do. He told me that I deserved it, that I couldn't punish myself for something that wasn't my fault. That was one thing he just didn't get. But he got it enough to know I hated talking about the whole thing. We were walking to get sandwiches in town one day when we passed an old man in rags and floppy sneakers, the usual bum get-up, who was muttering and compulsively smoothing back his gray hair. As we passed, he looked me right in the eye and said, "One day he'll come back to judge us, and that day will come in darkness." That terrified me. I've never been religious, but I've always been superstitious. It's something I got from my mom. I used to wish a lot. For a boyfriend who would love me really hard and deep. Wish on 11/11s and birthday candles and loose eyelashes and the odd shooting star. Now I just wish that I could give up something really great and get my big sister back instead. When Kaz told me that he was in love with me, I knew it had to end. The pleasure was just too much to bear. I didn't think that these emotions could coexist inside of me, the love alongside the grief. One would eventually elbow the other out of the way. It wasn't fair to my sister. I was afraid that if I let myself love Kaz, no one would be left to love Nina, not like she deserved. So, I went to college after all, on the other side of the country, and I brought my sister with me. But I left Kaz behind.